Hi, I'm Seth Andrews. I'm host of thethinkingatheist.com. And I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
You know, I had a whole entrance prepared as usual for four of us, but since there's only two of us today, I guess, we're just going to make a different intro.
I know, but we're such a lovely couple. Make it lovely.
So let's make this different.
Okay.
We'll say, coming at you from Gotham City, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin. I am the Boy Wonder. And joining me as usual is the Dark Knight, Nancy.
Oh, the Dark Knight. I like that. In all this snowy weather, I will definitely stand out.
Yeah, well, we have to apologize to our audience right away because our friend Tyler and Kevin are stuck somewhere in Chilliwack. You don't want to be stuck in Chilliwack during the summer, so it's even worse when you're stuck out there during the winter because the snow, the sky decided to open and just dump snow on us.
No, it's like being way up north someplace stuck in the igloo.
I know.
Oh.
Well, welcome back, my dear. Like you said, you have the trophy for perseverance for this podcast. And
so I think we share that dedication and perseverance for sure.
Yeah. So today we're going to have a great show. We're going to be talking about the power of positive thinking with our guests, Nadya
Dandurand.
Okay, perfect. But before we bring her on, let's do a bit of chit chat because so many things are going on.
It's been a busy week,
yes.
So regardless of what you choose, let's just have at it.
Well, this weekend is Super Bowl weekend. Do you care?
No.
No, neither do I.
But I'll pretend to.
It's supposed to be the biggest show on the planet. Everybody's up in arms about this. Did I ever tell you one time when I used to be a truck driver, I was stuck trying to deliver something in a semi in San Diego on Super Bowl weekend.
Oh.
And we're going there. I was driving with another guy. It was a team effort, right? And we're calling this guy in advance saying, you know what? According to our schedule here, we're going to make it around 3 o'clock Super Bowl. Was it Super Bowl Saturday or Sunday or whatever?
Yeah.
And are you guys going to be there to unload us? Sure, come on in, he says. So literally, the town of San Diego, everybody was just walking in the street. I was pushing my way through a crowd of people with a semi.
Oh my gosh.
Just to get to the loading dock there and realize they're not there.
Oh.
Nobody's there. And of course we're thinking, okay, we'll just park the truck and wait for tomorrow. No. Cop pulls around and says, you guys got to get out of here. So then we had to push our way back onto the street through crowds, and people are just not walking on the sidewalk. It's all over the street. It's all over the place.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Well, sure, that guy says, come on in. Well, he's already there.
He
what
doesn't
does
care.
He
He doesn't care. So a lot of respect for those truck drivers out there that are always bringing us the goods.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you got plenty of things to talk about Mr. Trump's immigration stop law order, whatever you want to call it.
It's been the wildest 2 weeks in government, I think, that's ever been in the United States. We're absolutely living through a historic period, and not in a good way, because we're stuck with a president who is autocratic, egotistical, doesn't understand the fundamental rules of government, think that just because he tweets at 3 o'clock in the morning, it shall be so.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
And then surrounds himself with people who are even crazier than he is in terms of their right-wing craziness, and also their sense of entitlement. Because all they've done is lived with money,
yes.
and more money. What's that? Isn't there a song called Money, Money, Money?
Yeah, I'm for sure.
They ought to have that as an implant in their brain at this point. So you get someone like that with the cohorts, and the rest of the country is absolutely turned upside down. But I think in a good way, because it brings people together to fight for democracy that they never even realized they had to step out of their houses for in terms of making a statement. And now they're traveling on trains and planes and automobiles to be able to stand up and say, no, this is not right, and we're for the Constitution, and we'll do whatever it takes to defend it. And that's a good thing.
Unfortunately, as a species, we have a tendency to be more reactive than proactive.
We do.
And politics demands that you be more proactive most of the time. And it really takes for people to be affected in their own personal life before they actually get up and say, you know what, I had enough of this. This is ridiculous. And it's starting to happen. But God knows, maybe it's too late. There's also something I mentioned to you a bit earlier. History is not a spectator sport. We have a tendency to look at it that way. But while we're just looking from the armchair there, history is actually in the making right in front of our eyes. So maybe it is time for our American friends to really get off their duff, really, and start to participate in what is their future.
Oh, I think so. And there are people who are participating and protesting and coming together that have never done it before. When I was watching the immigration ban, there were numerous people that were being interviewed that said, I saw what was happening on television and I just couldn't sit and be quiet. And I mean, good for them. There were lawyers who were giving up, their Saturdays, their Sundays, their Mondays, grabbing their laptops and heading to airports and talking to either the National Immigration Center or the ACLU or some of the other civil rights groups and saying, what can I do? How can I help? And it was fabulous that they came together and all of the signs that said, you're welcome to our America. You're welcome. You're welcome. And those are people that may not have known the history of the SS St. Louis that was turned away, but they're doing exactly the right thing. And I'm so, in that sense, I'm proud to be part of that.
Yes.
'Cause I feel as though in the long run, that our group of Americans, the diverse Americans, are eventually going to prevail. We just have to get this guy impeached and out of there as fast as possible.
It starts to get bad when the lawyers are starting to get involved in protests.
Yeah, and they were pro bono. They were coming out and doing exactly what they needed to do. The question now is what to do with this epic battle that is looming between Trump and the federal judges and the Supreme Court, and the Republican Party, who is just kind of sitting on their hands and saying, oh, wow, we get to get our agenda through. Regardless of that guy, we're going to get our agenda through because we can sneak it through while the spotlight's on him. It's really fascinating.
It is going to be fascinating. And like I've said this before, maybe the silver lining maybe about Trump's election is it might get the average American to finally give a damn. And it's about time it happens. It kind of reminds me in, I believe it was Bolivia, and we were talking about years ago, where it got to the point where government control and by corporate control, they had control of water. They privatized water to the point that you can even collect rain without paying or anything like that. And it got so, when it gets to a point where it's so vital to your survival, it gets viral. Right, and then people they come out in droves and in forces, and I think it's hitting towards a tipping point right now south of the border.
It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in reverse. First the self-actualization is getting shaken up, and then you go down, and how long does it take to get viral? You don't want it to get viral when everybody is at the survival mode and they have nothing.
Yes, exactly.
And that's what happens to countries where they have dictators who strip the country of everything, and now they're down to
with nothing.
Basic. But I'm really hoping that it doesn't go that far, because there's a lot of damage that can be done. At this point, I forget the name of the law. It's a review that the Republicans do now with anything that Obama signed in the last 6 months. They can actually go back and rescind all of those laws.
No pun intended, no blacklist. Whatever Obama did, right?
So what they're rescinding or what they're overturning are the coal companies were prohibited from polluting streams.
Yes.
Well, that's gone.
Yeah.
And people with severe mental disabilities were not allowed to have guns. They're voting on that today.
Yeah.
So it depends on how much damage they're going to do before all the restorative agencies and people can get together and
And I could get
put up a
that
wall.
because even in our own country, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came in, he walked back a lot of the things the previous Prime Minister Harper did. And, I totally get that. And just because we're on the wrong side of that fight right now doesn't necessarily mean that they have no right to do so. It's their country.
No, that's for sure.
I think they're bonkers for doing so. But anyway, and speaking of Trudeau, he also offered to take in refugees, American refugees, if they could not get back into their country. And why not? Just remember, our American friends, we have stronger beer, and you must prefer hockey over football and baseball for the next 4 years.
No, I mean, there is. I mean, there should be a right wing and a left wing, and there should be a pendulum that goes back and forth because there's good, there's good and there's corruption on both sides, and both need to have their turn. But when it's so blatant, for instance, when Tillerson now was, just as he took office, the next executive order was the Dodd-Frank, where oil companies are no longer required to report money that's given to foreign countries. Coincidence?
I think not.
I think not.
And of
anyway,
course,
we're shamelessly addicted to this, so if we don't move on, our poor audience is going to be
no. But we still got to talk
politics
about
here.
We still got to talk about the story of the week, of course,
Okay.
which is of course the shooting that happened in Quebec City, my hometown.
Oh,
Alexandre Bissonnette, 27 years old, 6 dead, 19 injured. He described himself as a Christian crusader. He's a white nationalist. He loves Trump. And an employee apparently from the Globe and Mail said that he was this particular person made frequent extreme comments on social media on their page for the Globe and Mail. It's a tragedy, obviously.
it is.
It's a horrible, horrible thing. And what I don't like about this, I don't like where this is going, unfortunately, because mainstream media in the U.S. are not calling him a terrorist. And let me be perfectly clear. This guy is a Christian terrorist. He's not a mentally ill guy. He's not a guy off his meds. He's not a loner. He's not, somebody that had an episode. No, this guy had a clear past. And I really don't like the fact that, if the roles were reversed, if this guy had been a Muslim, for example, that had shot a mosque, right away we would have called him a terrorist.
Absolutely.
But because he's white, we're kind of hesitating. All of a sudden we want studies and this and that. And I really don't think we should. We should really call a spade a spade.
No, I agree. In the States, part of one of Trump's executive order, I've lost track. Every time I turn around, there's an executive order and a tweet. But in dealing with terrorists, he specifically excluded white Christians as a terrorist group, and this is a perfect example of why this is a bad idea.
Exactly, which is funny because there have been more white nationalist murders and crimes committed by these white nationalist Christians than there have been terrorist attacks on U.S. soil.
Do you know if there's anything specifically, in Canadian law that
You're asking me about Canadian law?
Yeah, hate law, or
No,
I mean, are they subject to anything like that, or can they be called terrorists?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah,
it's a good question. Maybe somebody in the audience would know that. If you do have the answer, send us an email at left@valley@outlook.com.
Yeah.
Let us know. And there's one thing that kind of irks me about all this, though. Now, I don't want to sound insensitive, and you can tell me, Nancy, if I'm being an ass or a jerk here. But I'm listening to the radio, and they call it the Quebec Mosque Massacre. Now, I've got a rant later on that I think words matter. Words really do matter how you describe things. Now, when I think the word massacre, I'm picturing an entire village butchered. 6 guys shot is a horrible tragedy, but is it a massacre? I would call it a shooting. I would call it a tragedy. I would call it, I don't know what to call it, but a massacre, I think I think if you're calling these shootings, and it's no small thing, but if you keep calling everything a massacre, I think it kind of desensitizes us to the tragedy that's really there.
Well, I think this is exactly, I mean, you put your finger on it in an odd kind of a way, but I think media hype is such that we have become desensitized to murder. We have become desensitized to slaying. So now it's the next word in line that's more catchy, that grabs the headline. So I think massacre. What's the next word beyond massacre? Because we're moving pretty rapidly. Massacre is now going to be, two people that fall off a cliff, and it's going to be the apocalypse of killing. So the next, it's no longer. It is definitely.
I think we have to be careful about
moving
that,
on up in our society that demands a grabber of a headline for everything that happens, or they'll just scroll right by it.
I think we should almost do a show about this, because it's a bit, as atheists, we always bump into that, especially when you're dealing with theists, right? For example, they'll say, well, you have faith too, and you say, what do you mean I have faith? Oh, you have faith that the sun will come up tomorrow? No, I have a reasonable expectation that the sun will rise tomorrow. I don't have faith. Words and their usages do actually matter, and when you just throw in words willy like this because you're trying to make an impact, an emotional impact, I think you're losing your unbiased judgment at that point.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%.
Like I said, I don't want to be insensitive about the tragedy.
No, I don't think you're insensitive. I think you're spot on. And as a parallel, this was the week that Kellyanne Conjob was calling this fictional incident that she made up, the Bowling Green massacre, where nobody was killed, and that spawned a lot of satire.
Yeah, I'm loving all these
remembrance, and we have to not remember what didn't happen in Bowling Green. So there again, she chose the word massacre for fictional purposes. Well, at least this was an actual event. It probably was over the top word for the event, but at least it had some tie to what actually happened. These are strange times that we're going through, between fake news and alternate facts and hypermedia and Trump.
It's a good thing we have Left of the Valley oasis of sanity.
This is
calling our show an oasis of sanity. What does that mean?
This is a TV series where we're going to wake up at the end, right? I mean, we have...
It's a Twilight Zone. But in the meantime, it's time for This Day in History.
Oh boy, here we go. Speaking of over the top, here we go again in This Day in History, which is a roundup of those events and individuals that altered and illuminated the days between January the 30th and February the 5th. January the 30th is a day that most people up until this year would, if you ask them, tell me about Fred Korematsu Day, they wouldn't have known whether you're talking about a bakery celebration or a yachting event. It does. However, it was an executive order in 1942 that created the system. It was an executive order in 1942 that created the system forcing Americans of Japanese descent to live in internment camps. And this has been brought up quite a bit in the last 2 weeks. Well, days after President Trump used that executive order to shift the U.S. immigration policy, Fred Korematsu Day is attracting special attention, and it was a Google Doodle, which
a Google Doodle,
yeah, which was very timely. So here's the story behind that. Korematsu fought a discriminatory federal program all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and lost. Years later, he was awarded America's highest civilian honor, but it took a long time between the actual internment of Japanese and the reconciliation that it shouldn't have happened in the first place. He was born in Oakland, California, but his U.S. citizenship, he was a U.S. citizenship, but it didn't keep him and many other Japanese from being arrested for refusing to be relocated to an internment camp in 1942. He challenged the arrest in court, and 2 years later, the case finally made its way to the Supreme Court. Since he lost, he went to the internment camp. And then in 1983, the U.S. District Court in San Francisco formally vacated his conviction. And at the time, he told the judge who vacated it that instead of a legal pardon, he wanted to be assured that the U.S. government would never again take such an action, which I think was very noble on his part.
Totally.
The interesting thing is that while all of this happened, he had a family, and he had a daughter, still has a daughter named Karen. And over this last weekend, when all this was going on about honoring her father on Fred Korematsu Day, she said, he never told us when we were children that this had happened. It was so distressing that he never even told his family. So interesting story. Anybody that wants to read a little bit more about him, just Google Korematsu, Fred, Korematsu.
Yes.
Really interesting.
There's also some Japanese history locally right here too. There was a lot of Japanese farmers in Mission whose lands were deposed after during World War II.
Yeah, and then never again, until Trump got the pen in his hand. Take that phone and that pen away from that man. February the 1st is the start of LGBT History Month in the United Kingdom and Black History Month in Canada. It's also Black History Month in the U.S. So a lot going on in February. February the 2nd was Groundhog Day in the U.S. and Canada. And they had the different names for groundhogs, and for groundhogs, the name of a group of groundhogs is a repetition.
A repetition
of groundhogs, but I think it should be a prediction of groundhogs.
I think I will vote for that myself, a prediction of groundhogs. I love that.
Whoever names them, I think we ought to send them a petition saying that rather than a repetition, it should be a prediction, which is really good. Anyway, on Groundhog Day, there was Pennsylvania's Puxatawny Phil. We all know him. But there's Ontario's Wharton Willie and Nova Scotia's Shubenacadie Sam. I know I'm going to get dinged for that pronunciation. Anyway, they failed to see their shadows, according to their handlers. So that's going to be 6 more weeks of winter.
And of course, we have that today.
And in Winnipeg, they had a brand new kid on the block, and her name is Winnipeg Win, because Winnipeg Willow died last year, and they had a service for her. So Win is now taking over, and she spotted her shadow. So there's 6 more weeks, and spring will come. So let's all get behind the new girl.
Yeah.
We're all.
It's kind of funny. Only in this planet would we take weather advice from a rodent, but we don't think that climate change is real from scientists.
Makes perfect sense to me.
Totally, doesn't
it? Okay, here's a story. I always preface that when there's this is a goodie because it's improbable in many ways, and it takes place in my favorite U.S. state, which of course has to be Texas. So
of course, Texas.
Okay, so most Americans and Canadians as well know that Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. But before becoming president, he served as a U.S. Senator from Mississippi and also in a militia unit during the Mexican-American War. And he was Secretary of War under President Franklin Pierce. Anyway, as a young Army officer, getting to the point here, he was approached by a fellow officer who recommended that the U.S. Army use camels as transportation. Sounds a little strange, but this soldier said that camels had the ability to survive in the harsh desert environment, which was very much like the Southwest. They could do it on very little food and water, and they had great strength and stamina. So 20 years later, Jefferson Davis remembered all of this and actually ordered the creation of the first U.S. Camel Corps. Did you ever in your life? Did you ever know that there was a U.S. Camel Corps? In
No, I
Texas?
just knew that in the 50s, doctors preferred camels.
They did, but could they ride them?
Probably not.
So Major Henry Wayne was sent to Turkey to acquire 62 camels and trainers who would teach the U.S. soldiers the proper handling and use of the animals. So they were transported to Indianola, Texas, just sort of in the south part of Texas, and they were driven overland to the newly established Camp Verde, which is in Kerr County, which is in the center of Texas. So almost immediately, the officers began to make notes regarding the camels. They were terrible. They didn't get along with the other camels. They didn't get along with anybody else. So they were really difficult to keep and to try and train. So they hired a Turkish guy named Haji Ali, who they called Haj Ali, and he began in Texas. That makes perfect sense. So he began training the cavalry soldiers who would be using the animals to survey West Texas. I mean, they actually had a use. They were going to survey Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico territories. So he also established a breeding program. So Jefferson Davis experiment proved to be a success. However, and this is the big however, the Civil War intervened, and Confederate soldiers took over the Camp Verde in Kerr, Texas, and they didn't know what to do with the camels. The surveying jobs were over because now they were in the middle of the war. So what were they going to do with the camels? So the soldiers didn't know, the militias didn't know, nobody knew. There's no records that revealed if the camels were ever used by the Confederates. So most historians think that they did the easiest thing possible. They released them onto the Texas plains. So here go the camels. I don't know how many, there were 62 originally. So a number of them must have survived, because years later, in 1883, a woman living on a southern Arizona, this gets complicated, but it's a funny story. A woman living on a southern Arizona ranch was trampled to death by what one witness described as a huge red beast with a skeletal creature riding on its back. Local ranchers pursued the beast, but only found cloven hoof prints and clumps of red animal hair along the trail, and as sightings of the beast began to emerge from southern Arizona, wild tales of this beast became larger and more elaborate, especially with something, a saddle and something riding on its back. So they dubbed this the Red Ghost. So a few months later, and several sightings later, prospectors working in the Verde River, Arizona area encountered the ghost. They fired their rifles at the beast, causing it to run away, and in its retreat, something fell from its back, which would later be identified by a local doctor as a human skull with flesh and hair still attached. So much for the ghost. Here's this red beast they think something's attached, and now they find a skull in the middle of Arizona. It was just, you can imagine the interest that the story caused. Anyway, so the discovery of the skull strengthened the tales of the Red Ghost, and shortly after that, it was written up in the local paper that the beast might be a camel. But no one in that area had ever seen a camel before, so they wouldn't even have recognized it, even if they knew what one looked like.
Even if it trampled on them?
And there was no plausible explanation why a skeleton and a camel would even be in Arizona in the first place. Anyway, the sightings continued for almost 10 years, believe it or not, till 1893, when a rancher, and here's another wonderful name, named Mizzou Hastings, sighted the Red Ghost grazing in his vegetable patch. He retrieved his rifle, and whammo, one single shot, and he was dead. So ranchers gathered around, and now they found out exactly what it was. It was a camel, and they traced it back. They called it the devilish skeleton that had been seen riding the creature. And actually, it was a human skeleton that had been tied to that camel with thick leather straps many years earlier.
Oh,
so
God.
this camel for 10 years had been
carrying somebody on his back.
Carrying on his back the skeleton. So the origin of who that was just lost to conjecture. Historians speculated that perhaps the man was tied to the camel with some form of revenge by the
I think it's that doctor. The doctor that prefers the camels.
The doctor that smoked the camel. So they never figured out exactly, who that guy was. They never, found anything to it. But whoever it was, that skeleton and the red ghost have found their way into America's absolutely strange history.
Strange indeed.
Indeed. And that, dear listeners, brings to a close another passing parade of interesting, mundane, unusual, and as many bizarre events as I can find and people that make up this day in history. But isn't that wild that there were camels in Arizona?
Oh, totally.
And one with a skeleton on his back for 10 years? That poor animal.
Oh, the tales you come up with, Nancy. It just never stops astounding.
All true. Look them up. All verifiable.
And we'll be right back with our guest when we'll be talking about the power of positive thinking. Stay tuned.
If your skepticism is socially conscious and doesn't take itself too seriously, you might like life, the universe, and everything else.
People like Ray Comfort are fond of saying, what use is half a wing, right? Have you ever seen a fucking penguin?
Life, the universe, and everything else. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else.
I don't know, Zune? Is that still a thing?
Do you know where Saskatchewan is? Probably not. It's in Canada. If you do, you might know a city named Regina. In Regina, there's a studio. And in that studio, there are, at least once a month, a bunch of skeptical atheist geeks and goofballs who get together to do a podcast. We are the Brainstorm crew, and we're trying to help spread a bit of reason and critical thinking while still having fun. Never taking things too seriously, but still not accepting everything we're told. We go through different topics, exploring them in depth, and often disagreeing. We try to stick to provable facts, and we never trust a myth. That's why we say we're woo-free since 2013. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker under Brainstorm, or check out our website, brainstormblog.net. I can't promise you'll always agree with us, but I can promise you'll have fun listening to us.
All right, and we're back. Nancy, you have a friend of yours you'd like to introduce to the show.
Oh, I do, and I'm so happy that she's here. I've really been looking forward to this because I think our audience is going to get so much positive gain out of what she is going to be talking about. Many times we're talking about scientific subjects and we're talking about theories and we're talking about books, but this is, my friend Nadya will be able to actually bring people into a hands-on way of self-improvement. And I think that's something that a lot of times those of us as atheists tend to overlook. We get involved in a lot of philosophical things and don't pay as much attention to the things that we actually can do on our own to improve the world, i.e., help improve ourselves. So Nadya is a wonderful friend who is skilled and has gotten very learned in a number of different topics and subjects, one of which is attitudinal healing.
Attitudinal healing.
Nadia's just going to kill me. She's going to hit me on the side of the head with a club.
Yeah, but you can
because
hear.
The first crack out of the box, my tongue gets tangled in the very nature of her topic, which is awful. But attitudinal healing, which I'm going to let her describe, and she's also a Reiki master, which is a way for people to receive healing energies in ways that they can't always get. And it's a subject maybe not everyone is familiar with. Maybe some people have heard positive things and negative things, but now we're going to get what Reiki is from a true master. So let's turn it, instead of my gibbering away here, Nadya, why don't you get into some shameless self-promotion and give us, as we say here, the Reader's Digest version
welcome,
of
Nadya,
who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Nancy, for that lovely introduction. Don't worry about attitudinal healing. It's a big word, it's a big expression, and it's not always well described. So everyone stumbles over the word, and I wonder if there aren't some better names to call it, but I think we'll stick with it right now. I often call it inner peace. So if that helps narrow it down a little bit. But so, yes, I am a teacher of attitudinal healing. I do group facilitation. I also am a Reiki master, and being a person who really wants to understand things, I need a balance in my life, in my own mind, of what's rational and what's perhaps more esoteric or metaphysical. So combining attitudinal healing and Reiki is sort of a natural mix for me. I'm a teacher by profession, used to teach little children, and then transitioned into teaching adults, and love it just as much because I feel I address not only the adult but the inner child in each person. So
excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Nadya. I certainly appreciate that, and we'll go into depth on the healing part of the show. But for now, we're going to do a little segment we like to call
Things That Make You Go.
Things That Make You Go, And today we're talking about another doomsday comet.
Uh-oh.
Now, there's a comet named 2016 W49. It's a comet that NASA believes will pass by our planet at a distance of 51 million kilometers, or 32 million miles, which is actually pretty close by cosmic standards. It was first spotted by NASA Neowise project on November 27th of last year, and it should have been close enough to be visible in the northern hemisphere during the first couple of weeks of 2017. But according to one conspiracy theorist, a little too visible. Now, Dr. Diomin Damir, I'm going to butcher this, Zakharovich, his name has been popping up online in recent months. In conspiracy circle, he claims we're all in peril. He thinks, he thinks 2016 W49 is going to make impact with Earth on February 16th.
Oh.
Bum, bum, bum.
Do we need to plan? Is this like an end of the world day?
Well, this could be the very last show.
This is it. Okay.
It could be the very last show. So the object they call WF4.
It's a good thing we're getting Nadya on today.
Yeah. Well, there's still time.
Yeah, exactly.
He claims the object left the Nibiru system in October. Nibiru is that mysterious 10th planet that apparently exists somewhere. And it began spinning counterclockwise around the sun. Apparently Nibiru began to spin counterclockwise. God knows why. And since then, NASA has noted it will hit the Earth. They're only telling people now, he says. So according to NASA, the trajectory of 2016 WF9, I don't know why it says WF or whatever, that comet is well understood, and the object is not a threat to Earth for the foreseeable future. Ladies, are you packing your bags now?
Oh, wait a minute. Now,
are we going to a shelter?
Okay, it is or is not going to impact
NASA says it's not, but this guy says
it is.
Yeah.
Where on the planet is it supposed to land? Then
Probably
I'm going to know whether I'm going to
atmosphere.
pack my bags or get into the bag and hide.
With our luck, should be atmosphere. Maybe mission.
Well, then we might as well not pack. We might as well just look good, put on something shiny and sparkling, and go out with a bang.
Do you think
right this moment?
Do you think, Nadya, you'll have enough strength to heal the whole planet after that impact happens there?
It's not my job to heal the whole planet.
Yeah. So, any words of wisdom you guys want to give to all these poor refugees from the comet after this, or?
Oh my gosh!
Who wants to take a bet on this? I'm going to take a bet. It's not happening. Who wants to bet me? No, nobody.
No, unless there's a spaceship, everybody can get on and start to ruin another planet. I guess we're just stuck with whatever happens.
All right, perfect. All right.
And if we focus on that a lot, we can get ourselves really scared.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's a choice. Focus on it and get real scared, or don't, and be present.
Be in the moment. All right. Yeah. So today we're talking about Reiki and
attitudinal healing.
Attitudinal healing. I'm going to get it eventually by the end of the show.
No, you won't. It's
probably
one
not.
Of those.
I've accepted that now. So Nadia, I'm going to let you and Nancy go ahead with that. Explain to us what do you remember? You're on a skeptic show, so we're going to probably toss a few curveballs at you. What do you mean by attitudinal healing?
It's good to define terms. Attitude is, we have a lot of different definitions for attitude, and we think, what is attitude? And we think someone's giving us attitude. But attitude is really, if you look in the Latin, it's really about the position of your body, the perspective from which you see the world. Mm-hmm. So if you think the world is a dangerous place and people are not to be trusted, you're going to behave in certain ways, probably because of the thoughts you hold around that belief. And when we're in fear, we constrict, even our bodies constrict, which has a lot to do with healing too. Our bodies constrict or tighten. We're afraid to speak, our jaw tightens. We want to strike out and hit someone, but it's not likely to be appropriate. So our bodies tighten. So when we react from fear, and it is a reaction. It's not even a carefully considered response. We just automatically react. Then we behave in our world in certain ways. If, on the other hand, we believe that the world is a safe place, harder and harder to believe that these days, that somehow life supports us and that we have some inner strength to cope with things, that people are basically good, if that's our belief system, that we are basically good and really just want to love and connect with people. Then we respond, and I use, instead of react, respond from the French, repenser, which means think again. We consider before we respond to someone's words or actions, or consider carefully what we do before we mindlessly do it. And that's a choice that we have. We can react or respond, but it's not a legitimate choice unless we realize we have it.
It's sort of like the difference between whether or not you're going to respond or react like Donald Trump or respond like the Dalai Lama.
You just can't let it go, right? You just got to go back to Trump all the time.
Well, he's such a good negative example right now. Guy's got to be good for something.
No, I think I've got a very good example. I was reading a book called about verbal judo, which is a book about how police officers will interact with people, and there are some things that if reacting to a suspect calling you names, you can say, "Hey, hands up," and get on the ground, or you can actually start talking to see what the person is. I think that's what she's making an allusion here to, responding as
rather than reacting.
Than reacting, exactly.
Yeah, very much. So attitudinal healing is a cross-cultural wellness model for healing and well-being that's based on the power of human connection. There's very much in the teaching of attitudinal healing where we meet in groups. We learn how to listen empathically to each other, and rather than give advice, kind of hold that space with a person out of real respect and genuine caring, and enable that person to focus inward and find their own best answers. Attitudinal healing is less about the content of the principles, and there is a set of principles that's come out of this work, but it's more about the human connection and how we can be open-hearted to each other and begin to practice a kind of joining with each other rather than separation. Never more important than now at this time in a world of, pitting one against the other. And attitudinal healing has come from the work of a psychiatrist in California. His name was Jerry Jampolsky, who used to visit children in the cancer wards in hospitals. And on one of these visits, on many of the visits, he found that when children needed to talk about how they were feeling about their illness and possible impending death, they needed to talk to someone about about their feelings, and they would ask the medical staff, so am I going to die? What's it like to die? And the medical staff often would change the subject. Did you have a bowel movement this morning or whatever? Yes. And would change the subject, and the children were not feeling fully heard. So Jerry Jampolsky, as a psychiatrist in the oncology wards, would see this happening and really saw the need for children to be heard and to talk about their feelings. And so he started a center, a nonprofit center in Tiburon, California, and it was staffed by himself and 2 or 3 other psychologists who very much came from the Carl Rogers, the person-centered approach to therapeutic experiences. And so Jerry started with about 10 children from the age of 6 to 17. I've met many of these children. They're still alive, some of them. And their experience was that when children could talk about their feelings and experiences in a safe, non-judgmental environment, they started to feel better and they could relax about it. And it was like an experiment. This was in 1975. It was an experiment that no one thought would grow to the extent that it has. Now there are attitudinal healing centers all over the world. Organically, from that initial first group in 1975, other groups were formed. Children of the children who were brothers and sisters of the children who were ill said, hey, my brother's getting all this attention because he's sick all the time and nobody's talking to me. So there were sibling groups formed, and the children themselves said, I think my mom and dad need a group like this where they can talk about things because, they don't want to talk about me possibly dying or whatever. So out of those groups, actually the children wrote a book. I've got this book right here. It's called Advice to Doctors and Other Big People from Kids. It was a wonderful thing. And so the groups gradually expanded into including the HIV/AIDS population as that came current, and also then for bereavement, for death and dying people. And because nobody gets out of this alive, I understand, not physically anyway. And so there were groups for people who were experiencing other losses as we do, being human, divorce, separation, illness due to accident perhaps, and they were called person-to-person groups. It's in one of these groups that I found myself in 1997. And, when everything's going fine in your life, you're doing fine. But when you've experienced some losses, illness perhaps, endings of marriages, as in my case was happening, the loss of a business, the death of my mother, I was feeling very much the victim in my life and found, I was really asking for some kind of miracle. And I think when you open yourself to the possibility that, you can believe nothing's a miracle or everything's a miracle. It's a choice. Einstein said it's a choice. But when you open yourself to the possibility that maybe there's another way of going through your life as you have been, and you don't usually come to that question, even if your life is going along just fine.
Now, Nadya, I got to jump in there because this kind of reminds me of the movie Patch Adams with Robin Williams, where he's actually, he says that the doctors keep a professional distance from their patients, which you were referring to earlier by changing the subject. In the movie, the character of Patch Adams essentially says, why do we need to do this? Why not get involved emotionally to some point? Now, I can understand why you want to keep some professional distance and why you could also want to get involved. But I think from our audience at this point, I think some red flags are going up because they say this is the point where a lot of people will say there's probably some good, valid reason to have a positive attitude, especially when you're healing. But it's an easy step to step into the world of woo from there, right? To ascribe more than there actually is to positive thinking when it comes to physical healing.
Right. What is the difference if you have groups that are meet because of a specific situation or illness? If you have a grief support, if you have a grief group, or you have a group of people who are terminal cancer. What is the difference between the group meeting as a support group and a group that would be meeting under attitudinal healing principles? Is there a difference? Is there an overlap?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It's generally when we're in stress or distress or we have needs, we're generally reaching out for someone to tell us what to do, whether it's a doctor or an expert or a therapist or whatever. The shift in attitudinal healing is an inner shift, and it's about not reaching out so much for help, although that's an initial connection, but getting quiet enough inside that we can access our own best answers through our own inner teacher. That's one of the understandings in attitudinal healing, that we each have one. We each have an inner teacher. You can consider that intuition. When we get quiet enough to listen, we can find some really amazing inner resources that most people are not aware of. So what we do in attitudinal healing groups is, unlike most support groups where people usually would say, oh, I did that too, and I know, you know what you should do, attitudinal healing peer support groups are not about any one person giving advice or saving the day. It's all about helping a person find their own best answers, and that happens under certain conditions. To give you a better idea of what an attitudinal healing group is like, we always begin our groups with getting quiet, the practice of joining, where we often join hands and close our eyes, and if that sounds too woo-woo to you, it's okay. It's just human to connect. It's in all of us. We need that. And in fact, that's often the cause of much of our distress, is that we're disconnected from our inner, deeper selves and from each other. So attitudinal healing peer support is an opportunity to join with each other, remember our interconnectedness. We focus our intention inward and we focus our attention inward and set our intention to be present, to be as non-judgmental as possible, and to be with each other in the time that we're together.
Well, is this a leader focused group, in that if you are are you leading people toward through certain steps in order to achieve that attitudinal shift, or is the whole group participating in some kind of
roundtable discussion kind of thing?
Discussion in order to bring that about? How does who is, because it is, if it is individually focused, how is that brought around so that the individual, or are all individuals in that particular group feeling some kind of hurt, so that everybody gets a chance to express their hurt or heal from it? I'm a little confused on how. I'm rambling. How does that all work?
Okay, well, there is a facilitator. And so in my case, when I do the groups, I'm the facilitator. In larger groups, and certainly at the center in California, there would be 2 facilitators, because there may be as many as 10 or even 20 in a group. So there's a facilitator who is not just leading a group and having conversations, but focused on the principles of attitudinal healing. There are 12 that came out of that work with the children. They're not dogma. They're like guideposts. They're like putting on a set of glasses that you see through. You see your experience as, okay, I'm not explaining that very well. The principles of attitudinal healing are like guideposts along your path. So the group begins with joining in quietness. The facilitator leads. And then we go through the principles, the 12 principles. People share about which one might be helpful to them. And then we begin by sharing. And depending on the number of people in the group and the time that we have, we try to, the facilitator usually, or facilitators, try to, make sure everybody has a chance. And there's a very, gentle way to do that. And it's like, I really thank you for your sharing. For example, you're interacting with someone who's just shared. And we are you complete, and let's give everyone a chance to share. So there's a sharing of the time and a sharing of what's in us, and the difference between attitudinal healing peer support and just regular other peer support groups is that there is this beginning with joining, beginning with quiet, focusing on the principles, and then not giving advice.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
There are 12 principles?
Yes, there are 12.
Well, before we go into the 12 principles, I just want to go back on something I heard there, because I know when Tyler hears that bit, he's going to scream, and I can hear him scream from show like that now. You went to a point there where you said you're trying to get people to find their answers.
Yep.
Now, you're dealing with skeptics and atheists. We care mainly about what's true, not what's true to you. Right? So, and you're also dealing with a population that's, like you said, a lot of times in a very vulnerable state. So I guess my question is, how do you stop, for lack of a better words, charlatans from coming in and taking advantage of that situation? Right? Because it's when a person is at their most vulnerable, usually, that you'll see the vultures. We'll take religion, for example, because we're atheists, come in and give you an answer. It's not the truth, but it's a comfortable lie, and people will fall for it. How do you guys avoid that in your 12-step process?
Interesting question. For the most part, when I advertise my programs, or when anyone is drawn to attitudinal healing, it's, how do I answer that? Indeed, attitudinal healing does not usually attract people who want to disrupt things, but that is.
No, but you have to admit, it's almost a good recruiting opportunity, right? You have some very, for example, if I was a guy, one of your students, but I really wanted to push sales of a snake oil of some kind, I have a very good opportunity there to go to some people that are essentially vulnerable, and then say, hey, you know what? I might not have the answer, but here's an answer. If you take this, you'll feel better. The same way a person can say, your lost parent there is in a better place, although it's a comfortable answer, but it's not necessarily a true answer. So I'm just wondering, how do you guys cope with that kind of mechanism?
Well, that's kind of like giving advice or trying to save the day. And there's an agreement at the beginning of an attitudinal healing group that there are certain guidelines for the group. And one is that we don't seek to give advice. And sometimes when someone might speak up in that way in the group, I will ask the person who that is directed to, I'll say to them, does this feel like advice to you? And if it does, then we simply say, we're not here to give advice. We're here to listen to each other. There are certain guidelines for the groups, which involve certainly confidentiality of anything that's it's expressed in the group stays within the group. The agreement is to listen without judging as much as possible.
Which brings us back to the principles.
Yes, so, okay. So let's get into those 12 principles.
Yeah, let's get into those, if that's okay.
Sure. There are 12, and these came out of the work, Jerry's work with the children, and Jerry and the 3 other therapists in the group. And so the first principle, it's like everything else rests on that. And this one will probably stir some people up. But the first principle is the essence of our being is love. Attitudinal healing takes has a very high perspective on who we are as people. It's really very much about looking at who we are as people and looking at our humanity. And so, for a lot of people, there's so much reactivity to even the word love, and they don't even realize that they have these biases and opinions and beliefs. They just think that what they think is true. It's like that the story about a man who goes to a counselor, a psychotherapist, and he believes he's a dog, and the psychotherapist says to him, so how long have you believed you were a dog? And the man says, ever since I was a puppy. So it's like within the illusion, you're sure that this is who you are. And attitudinal healing simply, from that very first principle, gives you another perspective. It's like, what if you're not nothing? What if you're not just an animal? What if you're more than that? Just consider the possibility that perhaps you were born as an innocent baby and you were influenced by the people who raised you and were in your life, and you developed certain attitudes as a result of that. What if who you are is really okay?
Oh my gosh, I love this song. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool.
It's attitudinal healing comes from a perspective of radical innocence. What if who you are is okay? And it's a new principle for a lot of people. It's the understanding that within us is everything that's perfect and ready to radiate out through us. It's a process of healing our beliefs about ourselves and about each other. So it really starts, so the first principle is the essence of our being is love. And it's not something that's taught, you are love, you must know. It's an exploration of what that could possibly mean. So in groups, we go in and out of quietude and then sharing with each other. So it's a very kind of meditative approach in a group, and there's also time for speaking out. So it's not about looking outside ourselves for answers, but about looking inside. And
so what if I wanted to join an attitudinal healing group? Initially, would I have to be bruised or hurt emotionally in some way where I'm looking for some relief? And then when I joined the group, what would I expect from the group? Initially, would I come in and be lost, or would there be a structure to each meeting where you go through the quiet and then you go through the different steps, or does that depend on the leader and the group and what everybody is going through? I mean, is the group diverse so that I may be grieving because of a divorce and you may be grieving because of a death, but we're both grieving?
Well, first of all, I don't know of anyone who hasn't suffered some just by being alive.
Yeah, that's a joke, son. Don't you get it? I made a funny, son, and you're not laughing.
So there's room for everyone in a group, although some groups are focused on specifically perhaps bereavement. I've facilitated children's bereavement groups for Mission Hospice. I've done couples support groups, and I've done support groups for parents of children who are ill, as well as person-to-person general. Anyone can come for if this is what you feel drawn to. So, and the attitudinal healing support groups have a certain structure that there's a facilitator or two, depending on the size of the group, and the facilitators are trained in facilitating from the attitudinal healing perspective. We go through the principles. There's a set of guidelines for the group about listening without judging, not sharing outside the group, not giving advice. And often for me, I find that an attitudinal healing support group may follow one of my classes, which is a series of 4 or 5 classes that I call Inner Peace for Busy People. And this really teaches you in depth. It's really an exploration of who we are, what relationships are for, how our thoughts and attitudes affect our health, our work, our being in the world. And then an attitudinal healing support group would follow that nicely to help substantiate the teachings from the course, which is basically attitudinal healing and applying the principles.
If I wanted to join, is there any place that I could do some reading to kind of understand a little bit more about what I can expect and how deeply I'm supposed to participate, how much I'm supposed to reveal of myself so that I don't come into the group cold, not knowing, because that's tension and stress by itself.
Absolutely, yes. Anything can be stressful, and certainly self-revelation is a huge stressor for all of us. You want to feel safe with whom you are sharing your intimate details of your life. So, to answer your question, to attend a group here, you would contact me through shifttolove@hotmail.com. That's my email address, or you might see one of my posters in one of the coffee houses or at the Abbotsford Rec Center. I'm talking to UFE again after an absence from there to do some more attitudinal healing work courses in continuing ed. So once you make that contact with me and you want to know more about attitudinal healing, you can either join one of my 5-week groups, Inner Peace for Busy People, or I would direct you to the Attitudinal Healing International website, which gives you more of an overview from a global perspective.
So you get an introduction to the principles and how groups are run and a general overview, which would be, I would imagine, helpful to know whether or not you're at a time and place in your life where this might be the type of outreach that would be best for you, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's time to generate some more activity for my inner peace groups, and so that's going to be happening as we get rid of the snow and people can actually make it out of their houses.
What would be the goal, Nadya? Would the goal be that your students and people who go through attitudinal healing come with more awareness and better tools, for their emotional health, or to make some of these bruises in your emotional system fade away, or you become more adept in handling it, or does everybody set their own goal?
Well, people come for their own reasons, and usually when we've reached a point where we ask ourselves, isn't there a better way than this? Then something will attract you to, when you're looking for some answer, life generally supplies. It's like when I was going through the pain of my impending divorce, the death of my mother, and the selling of our business, I was really looking for some kind of miracle. And I was walking by the bookstore here in Abbotsford, Hemingway's books, and I saw a book in the window that says, "Change Your Mind, Change Your Life." It led me to, it was a book by Jerry Jampolsky. It told me about ongoing trainings at the center. It's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When you are ready for a change, I believe that life will provide you with some direction, especially if you're asking, I need some direction. And then people find their way. It's kind of a magical process by which we find each other. The people who've come to my groups have, been looking. Who doesn't need some respite from their pain, confusion, or whatever? And what a delight to know that all of these fearful thoughts that have been running you, that you have some control over. So the real value of attitudinal healing is that it teaches you that when we're upset, when things are going out of control in our lives, and we don't see a way out, we learn that it's not events or people outside ourselves that cause our upset, but our own thoughts, our own perceptions and attitudes. And when we find out that, hey, I'm scaring myself with my thoughts, or, I have more power over this than I realized. we learn how to shift that perception from fear-based thinking to love-based thinking, it's a real relief to find out that I have resources that I'm not using. That often it's our thoughts that when we think them habitually become habits, and that's back to the definition of attitude. It's a habitual posture from which we see the world. And attitudinal healing helps us retrain our minds so that we can help make the shift from fear to love, fear-based thinking to love-based thinking, and helps us see that we're not victims of the world we see, but we're making choices.
So, Nadya, if someone is at the point where what you're saying is really resonating with them, and they're perhaps ready to join a group that they feel would be of help to them, how do they get in touch with you? And how many, is it a group that's ongoing? Are there like 12 sessions, 10
what's
sessions?
the best way to reach you?
How does that work? So let us know all the different ways to get in touch with you, and then a little bit more about the length of time each group is, and for how many sessions it goes. I think that'd be very helpful.
Good. Okay, so I can be reached through my email address. I have two email addresses, but the one I'm using most often right now is shift, like the gears of the car, SHIFT, to the word TO, love, shift2love@hotmail.com. And although I've been teased about that, and someone, when I was taking a business course, said, "Oh, I hate your email address. It sounds like some kind of sex site." And I had to clarify that, no, it's an attitudinal shift. It's a shift in your thinking from fear-based thinking to love-based thinking. So reach me at shift2love@hotmail.com. I also have a business email that is innershift@gmail.com. Either of those will do, and anyone who wants to reach me can reach me there. When I post my little notices in coffee shops and places where I'm announcing my next course, there's a phone number also to be reached. And the courses that I teach, which are called either Inner Shift Experiential Workshop, I'll often take that one on the road, or Inner Peace for Busy People, they generally are, there's an introduction, usually an evening, a Friday night, and then there's either the weekend intensive, or when it's broken up into weeks, it's 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks of the course, which is Inner Peace for Busy People, a course in attitudinal healing. So
if I was to say in a nutshell, you guys are trying essentially to take people that feel that they're at the end of the rope, and you're trying to give them a new perspective so they can feel better mentally, therefore heal quicker physically
and emotionally and spiritually. And it's not just when you're down and out and you're on your knees, although sometimes it takes that before someone will say, "Hey, there must be a better way," and they're ready to shift. And I see my function as helping people become aware that what they're thinking matters, that you can think yourself into a real state of frenzy, despair, depression, or numbness, or you can begin with thinking that maybe there's some hope, maybe there's a way out. But I want to be clear that this is not simply positive thinking. This is not having a more positive mind. It's having a more peaceful mind. And when you don't know what to do from the attitudinal healing perspective, you don't flail around and run and go, who can help me? Although that's a very human tendency. The attitudinal healing approach is to say, if you don't know what to do, then do nothing. Sit quietly. Go into your heart. And that's a really huge shift for many people. Many of the people who have come to my classes said, I had no idea I was doing this to myself. I thought it was the world doing it to me. I thought it was my partner. I thought it was the government. When we realized that we have a lot of power just by shifting our thinking. and it's attitudinal healing at its core is also about forgiveness, forgiving ourselves for messing up, if that's what we're about, or forgiving other people who have hurt us. And it's basically a very empowering shift in our perspective that starts with our perception of ourselves. And that's the basis, and that's why the first principle is the essence of our being is love. It's a shift.
In addition to your classes, I know there are often corporations and self-help, self-improvement groups that often look for someone to come in as a guest speaker or do seminars. Do you do that as well, or do you pretty well, like just the class aspect of attitudinal healing?
No, I've worked professionally with groups and individuals in many settings. Teachers groups, parents groups. I've spoken at Parents Make a Difference conferences here in Abbotsford. I've worked with hospice groups and with just general population groups who are interested in learning more. So UFV, the University of the Fraser Valley, has carried my courses for some years, and it's now time to knock on their door again and say, here I am. I'm available for public lectures or workshops. I've worked with curves for women getting fit. I've worked with women redirecting their career paths, young mothers, people struggling with mental health challenges. I'm available. I would love to give service. And I think that, again, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And when the teacher is ready, the student appears. There's sort of a wonderful timing to this. Things happen when you're ready. And so I'm ready.
Perfect. Nadya, thank you so much for all your time you gave us today. You've been very generous with your time. But before we let you go, can I get you to do one more little favor for us?
Sure.
Can you say, hi, my name is Nadya Dandurand, and I took a left at the Valley.
Hi, my name is Nadya Dandurand, and I took a left at the Valley.
And that was Nadya Dandurand.
Yeah, I think that's different. So many times we talk about books and we talk about other things, but we have resources within ourselves that need discovering, as she said. So I think it's interesting.
You think she's onto something, or do you think it's woo?
No, I think she's on to something, because I know in many ways it is a matter of how you look at life that determines your well-being. Angry people,
I understand that,
promote anger. People who are more in tune with others and themselves seem to at least strive for a richer, fuller, positive.
I don't know. I'm still a bit skeptical about all that. I think we'd have to delve a bit deeper and almost go through the process, because I think it flows very close to the woo. It really does, in my opinion. But hey, you let us know if do you think Nadya is onto something, or do you think it's a crock? left@valley@outlook.com. Let us know. Perfect. She was a great guest, though. I love her.
Yeah, she was. I think it's pretty far from the snake oil. I think anytime you ask a person to look within themselves to find answers rather than buy a $900 machine.
Oh, I totally agree.
No, I think there's a lot of value to it, and I hope she comes back and we can continue the conversation.
Absolutely. I like we didn't even touch the whole Reiki thing.
Oh no,
I'd be kind of curious about that too. I actually happen to have a friend who also studies Reiki, so maybe we can bring him into it at the same time. So
that combined with Tyler, who will question everything.
Oh my God, I'm almost glad that Tyler's not here, because
looking forward to that show.
Should be real fun. Oh goodness.
And I miss Tyler and Kevin, so hopefully by next week the weather will be good and they will be able to join us.
Yes, indeed. Time for my rant. Now, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Remember that old line? The reason I bring it up is because I want to point out something we seem to have forgotten. Words have power. Words color things. This past week, a madman went on a shooting spree. Now, before you take away the mainstream media spin, you need to remember this. Bissonnette wasn't a loner. He wasn't mentally ill or off his meds. Bissonnette was a Trump-loving, Fox News-watching Christian terrorist who viewed Muslim as a threat as portrayed by her narrative push on the public for over a decade now. He even went to the length of portraying himself as a Christian crusader against Muslim invaders on social media, and acted on it. Now 6 are dead, more are still on the brink. Words have power. They color and describe a world, and if you're not careful with the words you use, you end up living in a world that doesn't conform to reality. Atheists, most of all, know this. Bissonnette didn't live in the real world. He lived in a world where there was a jihadist underneath every rock and dark corner, and that he was a fighter for a righteous God. His upbringing, his church, and the mainstream media helped form his opinion, and in as such, the blood of those people in that mosque is on their hands too. I hope you remember that next time you turn on the news and listen to a questionable news channel who talks about the American administration and in the same breath talks about the Russian regime. Words have power. Or when a Caucasian Christian terrorist is suddenly a loner, while a darker-skinned individual is a threat to society. Words color things. And I hope most of all you remember to stick to truth rather than rhetoric when some reality star vies for a political position, because like we just witnessed south of the 49th, while we stand and argue about what words we use, a con man can talk his way into the highest office of the country. And that takes us to the end of our show. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You can send us a message on leftatthevalley.com. Send us a message at leftatvalley@outlook.com. You can follow us on Facebook or on Twitter. What else am I missing here? Oh, yes, if you sign up for places like where you can find us on Blog Talk Radio or Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube. If you sign up for places like Blog Talk Radio, for example, they will actually send you an email telling you that we're about to air, and that's always good. You can follow us. Coming up next week, we should have Michael Smith of the podcast. I always forget the name of that podcast. I'll get it eventually.
Yeah. But it's a good one, and we'll have a good time, and it'll be great.
Yes, we have a lot of podcasters coming on. We also have the Brainstorm podcast with Corey Johnson. That should be fun. That should be at the beginning of March. We have Mr. Didi, Brian Keith Dalton. That should be really funny.
Yeah.
That should be around March 11th. And, of course, we have the beautiful, talented, and very smart Cara Santamaria on March 18th. So that should be fun. We also have Jem Newman from another podcast, another Canadian podcast that's coming up on our show as well.
Oh, that makes spring seem almost within reach, doesn't it?
Life, the universe, and anything else is his podcast. And the one I was thinking about with Michael Smith, Poorly Summarized. There we go. I finally got it.
There we go.
Thank you so much for keeping me company with us, Nancy.
Oh, it's always my pleasure.
You can always count on Nancy being here pretty much, unless there's a Martian.
We covered an awful lot, starting with Trump and ending up with attitudinal healing. I think that was a good
Trump
transition.
and attitude, yeah, right there. Coincidence? I think not. Thank you so much, dear. Until next time.
You too.
Rather be alone than surrounded by damn idiots. As long as there's a breath in my body, you can bet your last dollar I'll be working hard fighting this problem. Religion is a disease, it comes from culture, only true on a regional scale. Science is universal. Were you to say that Horus isn't real, but Jesus is, or Zeus, Thor, Mithra, Vishnu, you don't believe in them? I think the reason is apparent. You do what you're told and believe in the God assigned by your parents. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. Now let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that thousands of children are raped by priests, and since they're holy men of God, they get away scot-free, and the Pope does his very best to keep it on the hush. Don't wanna affect business, he loves money too much. We know that they love the kids, but how the fucking we protect them while they planning to molest them. We teaching them to respect them.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards, and the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to attack them. The parties of God's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's name. And let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet. You're not alone, speak your mind, time to let it be known. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist. I'm an